Welcome to a special edition of Gina's Gems. October is World Menopause Awareness Month, and we're here to talk about the impact of menopause in the workplace. Back in May, I hosted a webinar called Coming in Hot, a business case for menopause support in the workplace. We received so much positive feedback from women and men alike that we wanted to share some of the gems here today. The inspiration for the webinar was a very personal one for me, and I shared some of my personal experience in that webinar. I'm super passionate about the topic and committed to continuing the discussion. In the following segment from the webinar, my colleague Adrienne O'Neill and I answer a few key questions about the impact to employers in the leave space. 47 million women are experiencing menopause in the US right now. Women make up almost 60% of today's workforce, a vast majority of whom are in the 45 to 55 age range. Menopause is something that affects every single female. So we ask the question, why are we not talking about this more openly and trying to solve for the impact to the workforce? So Adrienne, on to you last, but certainly not least. Let's talk about the relationship between women's health and the leave landscape. So can you start by laying the foundation for how employer paid leaves have evolved?
Sure. Well, I'd say we're getting there, right? So the US has yet to really figure out how to acknowledge and address the complete life cycle of women's health, but rather seems to tackle it in a matter of bits and pieces. So Mary Beth had touched on this, when we took time, we're taking time to get there. We've seen some great strides with the paid leave landscape in support of pregnancy, delivery, and bonding leave. And this is happening either at the state level with mandated initiatives or through employer-sponsored offerings. And while this is excellent, we're starting to see the conversation expand with female employees really raising their hand to say, wait a minute, there's so much celebration and support for my fertility, but what happens when I lose that, right? And Mary Beth's client, we saw that when they conducted their own survey of their employee population. So if we think about the workplace, the median age of women is increasing as women continue to work longer and retire later. So as you mentioned earlier, approximately 47 million women will enter menopause each year. And that's staggering. And it's staggering because we're so unprepared, right? Women enter this stage of their life, they're often embarrassed, they're unsupported, and they're just powering through it, which is creating this horribly negative bubbling effect. So for those women who simply can't power through it, the result is not a positive one for both the employee and the employer. So again, noted earlier, and this statistic is such a large number, right? The global cost of lost productivity related to menopause tops $180 billion per year. So what's even worse is that many women are just choosing to leave the workforce. So while they're experiencing these menopause symptoms, they just feel like they can't any longer stay within their job. And that's awful because what we're seeing is that is happening with women that are at the peak of their careers. So their departure is one that's great for them, but it also imposes huge financial losses for employers needing to backfill those roles and expertise.
Not to mention, yeah, the expertise part, which is women at their peak of their careers being able to serve as mentors to the younger women that are coming up in their career. So
Yeah.
it's a huge impact on many levels. So when we think of disability and leaves of absence, what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, so this is a topic, as we've already mentioned, that is still very taboo in the US. However, in the past few years, it has gained some steam, and this is likely due in part to strides that our UK and Australian counterparts have already made. And then the media coverage and the discussion that then generates. So, from a disability standpoint, while menopause on its face is not a covered condition, the symptomatic conditions as a result of menopause could trigger claims. And we talked about this a little earlier, right? So most physicians know about the commonly touted symptoms such as hot flashes and fatigue. But as more research is made available, we're gaining additional education on the more severe and disabling conditions of menopause that we really can't turn a blind eye to. So we're looking at frozen shoulder and arthritis, the general aches and pains, an increase in mental nervous, reproductive conditions that all affect a woman's ability to meet the needs and the demands of her job. And in addition, we're seeing more lifespan reducing consequences that are heightened. So risk of cardiovascular disease increases, risk of diabetes increases, insulin resistance, cholesterol, We're seeing dental changes, vertigo. These are all disabling conditions that an employer should expect to see.
And the hits keep coming. The
Yeah.
list keeps growing.
Yeah.
So what is an example of a menopause leave, Adrian?
So I'd say our more progressive employers are looking to add around 6 to 10 non-cumulative leave days per year, where medical certification is not required for women looking to take time to manage symptoms. In addition, there really should be a focus on accommodations. So, similarly to what we saw with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, we really want employers to think about allowing women to work from home with the onset of symptoms if possible, having flexible work schedules, and offer quiet and rest spaces in the office. And this is hard. We hear about this a lot of times from employers, whether it's the cost or really in an environment where it seems like every day there's a new policy or an initiative or retention play that's being presented to the C-suite. How do we convince someone to buy into this, right? Where's the evidence? But we do see that the evidence to offer menopause leave can have a positive impact for the employer and their bottom line budgets. Right. So, led by our UK and Australian counterparts, we're seeing that women who feel more connected and supported in the workplace, they want to stay there and they'll stay in their roles longer. So, if we allow women the time to manage symptoms, as we've talked about, kind of taking away that taboo and that stigma, it not only allows them to be physically rewarded, but it also plays a huge role in supporting mental health, job satisfaction, pay equity, and really allowing executive level female representation.
Yeah, totally agree. So if an employer isn't ready to take this step, what alternatives are out there?
So even small changes really make a difference. I'd say start the dialogue. There's a huge stigma around women's health and the icky, we don't want to talk about menstrual cycles, but it's an imperative first step. So, even here at MMA, we have menopause support groups, offer education forums, consider partnering with organizations such as Maven, MIDI, or Carrot, whom have bolstered their virtual therapy options and educational services. And finally, and this is probably the most important, really look to enhance your basic training for all managers to understand symptoms and stages and the implications of menopause, right? So, using your example, Gina, of this sudden rage, we want to make sure that managers don't have to be experts, but they have an understanding on what are some of the symptoms, how do they adapt to that, what's the basic premise around perimenopause and menopause and the potential repercussions for an employee, and then arm them with the knowledge as well to support and help manage those resources and referrals for their employee base.
Thank you for joining us today. Clearly, this is a topic that resonates for us and for so many who aren't talking about it in such a public forum. So we're happy to create awareness and start to normalize the topic in the workplace. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates on future episodes on this topic. We will include a link to the full webinar from May in the description.